That's telling me to start the webinar on disruptive innovation. So looking forward to talking to everybody. I'm going to talk about what is the agenda. The agenda for today is we're going to have about a 30-minute presentation, and then we'll take questions, because the goal of this is to give information in a short period of time, provide a white paper, research on the topic, and then the next one will be on leadership. All right. So the first thing we'll talk about is what is disruptive innovation. And then we'll talk about some of the myths about disruptive innovation. And I'm going to have an interview with Clive Heal. And Clive is someone that I've known and respected for a long time. He is both an innovator and a disruptor. And we'll talk a little bit more about Clive when we do the background. But I can tell you one thing. Clive is a person that went to his organization and got them to invest in a big way in supplier innovation. I'll let Clive tell you what he's done. It's pretty exciting. And then we'll end up with tips for staying ahead in a disruptive world. So some tips that you can use. Okay. So first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the Chartered Institute for Purchasing Supply. It's the largest global professional body in procurement. It has offices in 8 countries on 5 continents, 150 members in 150 countries, a global community in excess of 200,000. It's the global standard for the profession, and that's one of the things that attracted me to CIPS, is the fact that they do have a global standard. It's uniform across the world, and in some cases, governments and organizations have mandated the standard. It's the advocate for licensing. Also, it's the only professional body in procurement and supply certifying to the degree level, independently regulated, and it's the leading voice of the profession. Now, I've been a member for about 5 years, and Clive, you've been a member for a lot longer. So do you want to talk a little bit about CIPS?
Yes, CIPS has grown dramatically over the last few years, and I think it's the leading organization really for procurement professionals now. And you know, it's made a lot of progress, and it's still making progress, and now obviously starting in the US as well.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about my background. I'm the Vice President of Operations in America and Canada for the Chartered Institute for Purchasing Supply. I've been in the supply chain for a long time. I've worked in procurement across a wide range of companies until recently. I was a CEO and founder of Aeropart Consulting, and I also spent 23 years at ADR North America. I've published a book called Transform Your Supply Chain, published numerous articles, and I'm working on a new book on supplier relationship. I have an undergraduate degree from the University, the Rochester Institute of Technology, and an MBA from Baldwin Wallace College, and I do a couple things for charity. My guest, Clive Heal, is a team leader and creator of the Roche Procurement Innovation Center for Excellence. For the past 6 years, he's led numerous innovation workshops with procurement, business partners, and suppliers to develop business cases that address business issues or deliver new value opportunities. A member of the International Society of Professional Innovation Managers, he suffers from continuous stream of ideas daily, and I can certify that. For Clive, there's no box to think outside of. The glass is always full, not half full or half empty. He lives in a world of near infinite possibility. The international speaker on innovation, born in England, he has worked at Roche since 2003. He's a fellow of CIPS. He also has a CPSM and originally a chemist. Clive worked for several pharmaceutical companies, plus led procurement and consultancy assignments for PwC. He lives in Marin County, California, with his wife, Anne Marie. They enjoy spending every year in France, plus working to support homeless youth in San Francisco. What a great guy. When we think about disruptive innovation, you wonder, what is disruptive innovation? And I had a hard time coming up with a definition, but to put it simply, disruptive innovation is a change that creates a new market and a value network that disrupts an established market and value network, displacing incumbents, products, and supply networks. So we can think about some of the examples that we know of. I put the transistor radio, which was a big innovation when it came out. Got rid of all the tubes and big boxes of radios, and then came in the Walkman, and then later on the iPod. So some of those innovations. And when I start thinking about disruptive innovations, video on the web. I can remember I was working in a company that made the frameworks for movies. It was Technicolor, and they were talking that their business was going down because the studios were going to stream everything to the movie theaters themselves. And I thought, wow, that's a weird kind of thing, but it's a reality now. And when you think about ride sharing, that's a huge innovation that came in and disrupted the whole industry. And I'm still astounded that the taxi industry hasn't really come up with a way of finding a way to pick you up off your cell phone and match that they stay with their old model, which I'm not sure how long that industry will be around, but the value and the market changed. Bitcoin and blockchain are starting to make their way in. 3D printing is another disruptive innovation. I was talking to someone that led a 3D printing company, and they were actually doing war games for the Navy. And the way that they had a piece of equipment break down, the guy brought out his printer, printed the part, and they actually won the war game. Now there's a whole discussion on, what is the value of 3D printing? Where's it going to be? What's it going to displace? And I think in the MRO business, it's going to be pretty interesting. When I haven't been to a mall in about 10 years, and I don't know how long malls will be around, but e-commerce certainly has changed. I live in Phoenix, which is an interesting area. I can get groceries in 45 minutes. Almost anything I order comes in the same day, and it's a big change. And then there's also genetics recoding. So there's some examples of how we see disruptive innovation. Some questions I have right now is, why did Amazon buy Whole Foods? Where are they going? They're disrupting the grocery market. And then in the past week, we see Walmart wants to buy a health insurer, Humana, and that's going to change quite a few things. And that's changing industries and all. So, where is Walmart going to be, in the retail grocery space or in the insurance space? It's going to be in both. So we start to see industries change and profiles change. The Dollar Shave Club changed the industry. Gillette and some of Schick and some of the big razor companies had a lock on the industry. And all of a sudden, someone comes up with an idea that says, "Hey, let's send out people efficiently razors at a low cost that they can have," and the whole industry's changed. Now I'm seeing that people are looking to change that. I've put this collage together because this is kind of some of the changes I've seen in my lifetime. The first one's the Omega watch. That was something that my first company gave to people when they retired. That was the most valued possession. And that's a Bolivar Accutron. But now you have I have a watch that I don't need my phone. It rings. I can talk to people. They understand me. And that was just a dream a few years ago. This next one, the picture in black and white, all up on the left-hand side, that's me. Classroom learning was the way to go through grade school and everything else. Now you have homeschooling and e-learning. The dial-up phone, or going to a phone booth in the road with a map, and that was the way of life in my early career. Now we've got the iPhone and smartphones that changed the whole industry. The space exploration, that calculator on the bottom, that was the first calculator I had in my desk, and I lived with a company that said that was the calculator that people would use forever. And then the TI calculator came out, and it was quite expensive in the 70s. It was about $500, and the company said, electronics are a fad. Obviously, they're not around anymore. That same company owned a typewriter business, and when they had the opportunity to go into printers, they went into printers and then exited and said no one will come away from typewriters. And no one will want a desktop computer. That's, again, another disruptive innovation that I've seen in my lifetime. And now we're seeing, my first car was a Volkswagen, and we're seeing driverless cars. And like I said before, people running around with maps or displaced with GPS, and now your smartphone will do that as well. When I think about innovation, there's a lot of people that say disruptive innovation. There's a lot of myths around. The first one is that disruptive innovation is new. And I'll take you back to Henry Ford. When Henry Ford built the assembly line, he was able to put out an affordable car and displace the horse and buggy. Disruptive innovation is a product. Well, not when you think about Uber or Lyft or some of the processes that change, or some of the process changes that happen that actually create a new industry. And we'll talk about why people don't change. Disruptive innovation is a good thing. Yeah, it can be a good thing. Uber or Lyft and some of the conveniences, having Amazon be able to deliver to your door in an hour's time or 2 hours time or in the same day, great. But it also, disruptive innovation could be a bad thing. The subprime mortgage is an example of one that went the wrong way, where it actually almost destroyed the financial industry. Disruptive innovation can predict the future. Well, it can't, because innovation occurs when it occurs, and when it comes and disrupts the organizations, there isn't a plan for it. So we do see that that can happen. It can't predict the future. You can't really predict when it's going to occur. Someone has a great idea and they stick with it. And then it's nearly impossible to disrupt a large global business. All I'll use for an example there is Kodak. Kodak stayed with film. They thought film was the way to go. That's where they made their money. And when they realized that the digital business was interrupting the industry, the change was way too late. So the interesting thing about disruptive innovation is it can be if you're in an organization that's focused on quarterly earnings mentality, it's going to inhibit disruptive innovation. Disruptions tend to be led by outsiders and entrepreneurs. Existing market leaders don't pursue innovation because they really they're not profitable. They take investment, they take commitment, they take resources, and so existing leaders ignore those kinds of innovations. It takes resources, and a lot of them don't want to devote resources to blue sky projects. They want to invest in those things that give them a quick return. And it could take a long time to be a disruptive force. So it takes time to embed and change. But there are a lot of reasons why disruption can be ignored. So, it's kind of interesting because you can come across these roadblocks, but the disruptors, when others stop, they find their way through the barriers. So with that, I want to introduce Clive Heal. I did his bio a little bit, but I find Clive one of the most interesting people I know. And there's a lot of things that Clive has done. He's actually gone to his business, got them to commit to putting a center in place, having dedicated teams of suppliers and company officials work together on innovation and then deliver innovation. But I'm not going to give Clive's story away. I'm going to pass it on to Clive.
Well, thanks, Bill, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to try to move the slides. Oops, sorry, jumped on a bit. So as Bill said, I'm Clive Heal. I lead the supplier, the Roche Innovation Center of Excellence in San Francisco. And this is the story of how we set that up and what we do. We launched in June 2012, so we've been going just about now 6 years. And so I wanted to give you some background about that in terms of how we work and the role really of innovation in procurement. So I think there are 3 key elements to our Innovation Center of Excellence. There's the people, the process, and the environment. The people that actually run the innovation program, if you like, the process that we use to create the innovation and create the value, and then what's the environment that we have and how does that help? And so what's happened over the history is that in 2012 and 2013, we focused on relationships with manufacturing suppliers, long-term relationships with manufacturing suppliers. So how do you create value through innovation, mutual value for both ourselves and the supplier organization? In 2014, we extended that to cover spend areas beyond manufacturing, but also fast track relationships. So instead of having dedicated people from the supplier working here on site with us full time? How could we work remotely? And what happened then in 2015 is we started to get asked questions and for support on innovation to resolve business problems where there were no suppliers involved. So we have this business issue. Can you use your process to help us address that? And of course we did. And so in 2016, we moved a lot more to the internal innovation, helping resolve business issues. And then we sort of moved back in 17 to try and balance that out and focus maybe again more on the supplier related innovation. I actually think the future of procurement is very much about value creation and ultimately way beyond just third-party spend. So for me, even the word procurement will go in the future as we move to being the value creation engine of the business. And where we are right now in 2018 is we're looking much more at, rather than being a bottleneck, how do we target the people and the key process steps which have the most opportunity to deliver value from innovation. So how do we push it out there into procurement and into the business in terms of more innovation capability, so we're not the bottleneck. Just to put it into perspective, we get about 3 times the number of requests direct from the business as we do from procurement for innovation work. So there's a big appetite for innovation and driving value through innovation. And for procurement at the moment, that for a lot of companies, obviously that means supplier innovation and value from the suppliers. Let me move to the next screen. So we have people, their job titles are value creation agents. Their job is to facilitate the process. This is our current model, and we connect with a person, either internal or external from the supplier organization. But what we're doing right now is moving this outside. So instead of people coming to us, we're trying to train this capability to run innovation programs outside of just the team here, and move it into procurement people within the business. This is the process that we use. It's based on the Disney creativity strategy. It doesn't matter what process you have, but you do need to have a process to drive innovation forward. The 4 steps in the middle: create, plan, challenge, and evaluate. These are the Disney process. And then I added in 2 other steps, so research and implement. So in the research stage of our process, we aim to understand what is the business need or the opportunity, and where might we look for value through innovation. The creation stage is a ideation workshop. It's a brainstorming. It's coming up with ideas for how you could solve that particular problem. The planning workshop is about taking the high value ideas and how would you implement them? So quickly, how would you implement this one? How would you implement the next one, and so on. The challenge workshop is where we look for the reasons why an idea won't work. Contract, lack of people, intellectual property, technically not possible, that sort of thing. And then in the evaluation workshop, we basically take the high value opportunities. We've looked at the implementation complexity, and we select which 1, 2, or 3 will go forward as a business case. And then we write the business case, and that gets approved and implemented. The challenge with innovation is not actually to come up with ideas. That's actually pretty straightforward if you can create the right environment to do that. The challenge with innovation is to be able to sell the business case. So you have to sell the business case, and then you're into implementation. And it's implementation that gets the value. So an idea alone doesn't have a lot of value. It's when you actually physically implement the innovation you get some value. So we have a dedicated center of 3,400 square feet where we run this program with suppliers and or with internal business partners. One of the things that we do have in the center is we have a creative room where we're able to change the emotional configuration of the space. So we change, as you can see, the pictures don't show the colors too well, but we change the lighting, the heating, the equipment, the furniture in the room to to create the right environment for optimizing the output of that stage of the process. So for example, people are most creative when they are in a blue environment. So we have 3,400 lights hidden in the ceiling and the walls, which color the walls. People are most creative when they're relaxed and kicking back. So we have bean bags, we have blue furniture. People are most creative when they're having fun. So we have toys and things that we throw around the room and play with. People are most creative when they're cooler rather than when they're hotter. So we actually take the temperature in the room down for the creation workshops. And basically what we're trying to do is, and people are most creative when they feel safe and secure. So physically safe, the room is virtually soundproof, but also safe that they can generate ideas without criticism or comments from anybody else. And so basically it's a brainstorming session where we capture the ideas, typically 100 to 150 ideas per workshop. You see in the planning session, we change the configuration of the room. In the challenging session, we actually take the temperature of the room up because that helps stress people. And when people are stressed, they're going to challenge the ideas more about why the idea won't work. And then the evaluation session is a yellow and a cooler environment as well. So basically changing the environmental configuration to help optimize the output of the process. And so over the last 6 years, we've had long-term relationships with 8 partners. We've done the program over 150 times, and we actually analyze the output in terms of the different types of innovation. Core innovation is continuous improvement. It's like sort of small incremental improvement. Adjacent innovation to us is something that's new to Roche, new to our company. And disruptive means, as far as we know, nobody else in the world is doing this. And if it works, we could be the first company to do that. Of course, you never really know, but and you can see how our business cases split down. 98% of our business cases are approved. That is the hardest part. You have to get a powerful business case to be able to get the people and resources and commitment from management to actually go ahead and implement the business cases. So the business cases need to be powerful. That's done by making sure that you're really addressing a business need, a business issue, and that the senior people have signed off to it at the start of the process. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, resolving their bottom, baseline issues like food and water. If you solve their problems first with innovation and bring value through that, then you can get opportunities to bring new ideas and shiny new toys the next time around. And we've worked with over 50 groups now within Roche globally on different business issues and different opportunities. But it is important to create a portfolio of innovation work that's both short and long term, if you like. And then in terms of looking at innovation itself, how do you measure it? Are you addressing a business issue or bringing a new value opportunity? Make sure you got a diversity of innovation coming forward. And are people excited to be a part of the process? And are they helping sell the innovation and the ideas before they even get presented to senior management? In terms of enablers, you really need a challenge question which actually is emotive and people want to participate in and they want to generate ideas, and that helps build active business participation in the process. And then are you getting the business cases approved for implementation? That's the hardest part. And then in terms of the value, are the innovation business cases getting approved, launched, and implemented? And then we use value statements as a way of measuring what the value is. And let me just go on to the next slide and explain what a value statement is. So basically, a value statement, I'm going to try and see if that works. A value statement is something that's meaningful for the business. I'm struggling to change the slide here, Bill. Something that's meaningful for, here we go. Thank you. Something that's meaningful for the business. So obviously, procurement are always involved in cost reduction, but we also look at headcount efficiency, speed time, typically for a process, risk reduction to the business, customer or patient benefits and revenue growth. These are the typical value types. And a value statement is, we're here now, we want to get to this level by this date. So our value statements typically have a start, a target, and a date when we're going to get there. So this process currently takes 5 people. We want to get the process run by 3 people by the end of June. Or this process currently takes 27 days. We want to get it down to 2 hours, by December. So we typically use value statements as a way of quantifying the value. In terms of the first launch, when we asked for the money to build the center in 2012, it was based on demonstrating a return on a 5-year net present value calculation. So we were given a tool from finance to be able to quantify the net present value, the 5-year net present value of the business cases coming through, and we had to demonstrate a return within the first 18 months. And in fact, the review took place 14 months after launch, and at that point in time, the 5-year NPV was 88 million Swiss francs. So we obviously got more than our money back in terms of the NPV, and in fact, we moved on then from net present value calculations onto value statements, as you see here, to quantify the value. So 2 things: make sure the value statements are meaningful to the business partner, make sure that they are quantifiable and they can be measured, and make sure we have a baseline, a target, and a date by which we're going to get them. So basically, as I said, our value statements are what we build into the business case to demonstrate and create the value. And thank you, Bill. Here's just a few examples of some types of value statements that our business cases typically would have. So obviously, there's often a cost component, but not always. Often the value coming from an innovation program doesn't have to be cost. It can be some of these others. And you'll see I added in a quality one here as well. So even though quality wasn't one of the main 6 that we use, you can see how you can measure a quality improvement. And you could argue that everything could be quantified, or lots of things can be quantified in dollar terms, which is probably true, but we try to define the value statements that are really meaningful for our business partners. So what is it they really want? What is it they're looking for? Let's articulate what the value is that you're looking for, and then let's put it in a value statement here. And that's what goes in the business cases.
So one of the things that I want to do is kind of how do you stay ahead in a disruptive world? And when you get the white paper, these will be great, but you want to think the unthinkable. You want to challenge things, kind of like Clive was saying. You want to look out of the box. What could you change? What would you change if you could change it? And would you change the process? Would you change the design? That's good. You want to encourage collaboration. I was looking in the paper, and Tom Linton made a great statement about collaboration. And if you don't have collaboration, you're just a standalone business and you don't have a lot of opportunity to share. And one of the things that Clive brought out is that sharing cross-functionally and sharing with other suppliers was great. Don't rely on benchmarking, because when innovation comes through, the benchmarks are useless. Everything's going to change, so you've got to be agile and flexible. And I've been to a couple conferences. One was the CPO Rising conference, and the whole theme of all the speakers was agility and flexibility in the supply chain are required right now. You want to think like a data scientist and use data. You want to present your arguments with data. One of the things that I see with procurement people is they tend to want to work off of their functional strategies and tell everybody what they want, but they got to go. You've got to use data. You got to show senior management data. Clive showed it in terms of how he could get return. You want to spend innovatively. You want to be first, and you want to manage innovation. And it's really a challenge to manage innovation. It doesn't happen on its own. You have to drive innovation. So I'm going to give a couple final thoughts and we'll take some questions. I pulled three inspirational quotes. Guy Kawasaki is a guy I follow a lot, and he was originally at Apple in the start. And I like this quote. Great companies start because the founders want to change the world, not make a fast buck. Steve Jobs is basically saying you have to be burning with an idea or problem or a wrong that you want to right. If you're not passionate enough from the start, you'll never stick to it. And then Elon Musk says, when something's important enough, you do it, even if the odds are not in your favor. So I think those are pretty inspirational, and they kind of follow the themes that Clive has outlined in what he's done in the Innovation Center. So with that, I'll open the thing up to questions. We have a question. How do you test your innovation initiatives before implementing to reduce risk? And Clive, that's, I guess, for you.
Typically in design thinking methodology, you actually pilot or prototype something before you launch it. We don't usually do a prototype. We will pilot something as a start to prove the concept, if you like, but the pilot is always after business approval. So typically we won't pilot something and then go to the business for approval. We'll go to the business for, this is what we want to do. Do you agree to run a pilot? They say yes, and then we would pilot it that way. So we tend to we do, if it's really big and scary, then we will do a small scale launch first, but usually we don't do a lot of prototyping in the typical design thinking type of methodology that people often use.
And then the next question is, can you provide examples of tested and proven innovations in supply chain?
Yeah, let me give you maybe a couple of examples. So a really simple one, right? The simple one we ever did, right? We found that we were watching the deliveries coming into the warehouse from one of our suppliers, and what we noticed is that in watching this, and the whole question was, how can we improve the efficiency of the logistics part of our business? What we noticed is that the boxes were coming in, they were shrink wrapped on pallets. The truck would pull into the warehouse. The forklift operator took the pallets down off the back of the truck in the receiving bay of the warehouse. The person then took off all of the shrink wrap with a knife, put all the boxes took them all off the pallet, put them all in a row, walked along with a barcode scanner, scanned them all, put them all back on a different pallet, and then put them up on the shelf in the warehouse. And that took about 20 minutes to receive each individual delivery. And the idea was very simple. The idea was, well, what if we got the boxes delivered with the barcodes on the boxes all facing out on the pallet? And so what happens now is, and that was agreed with the particular supplier in less than a week. The next deliveries were coming in. The boxes had been pre-arranged with the barcodes already facing outwards on the pallet. The operator simply could walk straight round, scan every box with the barcode reader. They didn't take off the shrink wrap. The pallet literally was taken off the truck, scanned, put up onto the shelf, and it was literally done in 3 minutes rather than 20 minutes. And it was simply a simple, very simple process improvement, innovative idea that somebody came up with that was so obvious. It was like, why do we never do that before? So then it was a case of talking to suppliers, say, you know, when you're packing stuff on pallets, please always can you put the barcodes facing outwards, because it saves us a lot of time.
Yeah, Clive, I have one. I mean, one where we were working in electrical transformers, those power pole transformers, and there was a supplier that was supplying an oil, and he had a patent on the oil. It was a special oil, and one of the consultants went through and looked at the oil, and when he looked at it, it was $11 a pound, and they use, like, I want to say they use at least 15 pounds or more, or 50 pounds or more in a transformer. When he looked at it, it was just soybean oil with 1% chemical to make it not rancid. And so he found different chemicals that would do that, that went around the patent. And the soybean oil was $3 per pound versus the $11 per pound on 77 million pounds. Okay, we got a couple more questions. Can you provide an example of tested and proven innovations in the supply chain? And that's Alger. I can think of a couple. I mean, that we worked on. Remember, we worked on a piece of capital equipment where the supplier again had patents, and we went around the patents by looking at how can we redesign it, and we went through all the regulatory authorities, and that one saved. I don't know how much money it saved, but it was probably hundreds of millions of dollars. You remember that? Okay. Next question. What is the typical life cycle of the innovation cycle? That's up to you, Clive. I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, you can do the whole thing in a day, or you can take longer. We're running one. I'm running one right now with our finance organization. We decided to spread the sessions over a 1 month period. So we literally just finished at the end of March with the outcome of that. It depends. Let me just explain. There is work to be done between each of the workshops. So at the end of the first workshop, for example, the creativity, the ideation, it pays to go through and analyze then the value and the complexity to implement, and also consolidate identical or similar ideas that came out of the brainstorming session into one idea. So there's sort of work to be done, if you like, between each stage of the process. When you've done the challenge workshop, for example, if you come up with some real roadblocks, you need to look at the idea and say, well, is this idea so important we really need to find a solution to that, or no, let's just hold that one, we'll park that one and we'll move on with other ideas. So it does pay to have a bit of a gap to do the work in between each of the workshops. You could easily do the whole thing over a couple of weeks. You've got the simple problem, the logistics, just getting people on calendar and getting them to the workshop. And then Disney found out two important things when he came up with this process nearly 100 years ago. People continue to think of ideas after the ideation session, after the creation workshop. So it pays. So, they're going along, they're driving along the next day, or in the shower, or they clean their teeth, and they have another great idea. So it pays to allow people the chance to add more ideas after the workshop, because the more innovative, disruptive, creative ideas typically come out at the end of the workshop, or even after the workshop when their subconscious has had time to think about it. And then the other thing that Disney came up with is that people's willingness to accept a radical idea improves over a couple of days. So when you first hear something that's truly innovative or radical, you think, oh, that'll never work. But actually your subconscious considers that over a couple of days, and you become more receptive to a disruptive idea after a couple of days. So it pays to separate the creation from the next stage in the process, to give people time to come up with more ideas, but give them time to accept some of the radical things they may have heard in the creation workshop.
Clive, I'm going to combine two of these. How do you motivate suppliers for innovation, and which projects provide you the highest savings?
Okay. When we approach organization suppliers to work with us, we have never had any problems attracting companies to work for us if it's sold on mutual value creation. So it has to be a win-win. I really believe that supplier collaboration is the way forward. As long as you continue to try and drive down price through competition, you're not really going to motivate suppliers. The minute you start talking to them about mutual value creation, win-win, it's you've got their interest. And you can't do that with every supplier, of course, but talking to suppliers in a way about, we want to create value and want to create it with you, is certainly a way to get their interest and participation. And for the long-term relationships here, the suppliers gave us a full-time person, relocated into San Francisco, 100% dedicated to our organization for a minimum of 10 months. And somebody just rolled off who was here for 2 years working with us on innovation. And then the second question, Bill, was about?
What's the biggest savings?
What is the biggest savings? Okay, we don't just focus on cost savings. We focus on other opportunities as well. So some of it is, I think you've got bigger potential in terms of revenue growth and in terms of helping take costs out of the business as you have in terms of savings. So typically, cost savings is not the number one driver of the value that we do. So
well, long term, Clive, it's going to be it's not going to be important at all. On two examples, I work in the home building industry, and they could save money on roof tiles or lumber or whatever. But the biggest problem in the industry is they can't find labor to complete the houses. So if they can't get their houses built and they can't get them closed, then they can't get a return on capital for all that land they've invested in and all that development they've done. So, you know, the value is really finding the right suppliers that can provide the crews that can get the job done. So I think I agree with you, and some other ones too. I mean, I worked in the glass industry, and you know, you could get a few cents off a refractory brick, but then it takes you like $15 million, $20 million to take down your furnaces to rebuild them. And if you can get a year's extra life, you delay that expense. So you know, value is going to be more and more important as we go to the future. So Scott asks, I'm just going to take four more questions, and then we're going to have to end. But Scott asks, how has your approach replaced or complemented a typical innovation management framework approach, which I would expect Roche has?
Yeah, we have different innovation groups now. When we started in 2012, I don't think there was one actually in another part of the business. I think what we're seeing is that lots of groups now are starting, lots of functions are now starting their own innovation groups. I think one of the challenges or opportunities is how do you connect that together? So how do you connect together the innovation work done by different business areas? We've always had scientists and people doing research on the molecule front, but now we're seeing these different innovation groups right across Roche. How do you connect them together in a community where we're sharing best practice, if you like, about processes, about learnings, about metrics, about trainings? I think that's a huge opportunity. We're not really, we haven't really got our arms around that yet, I think, to be honest.
The next question comes from Marcelo, and he's asking, any advice to ensure that the business case is robust and has a better chance of getting approved?
Yes, absolutely. This is, I think this is the most important thing. I can give you 3 or 4 different things straight off. Make sure that the people who are going to decide at the end of the day, the decision makers or decision-making committee, whoever's going to give you the resources to implement it, make sure that they're the ones who sign off right at the start of the process. This is the problem we're trying to solve. This is what we want, because then you know that you're actually going to bring them a solution that will address their issue. Another one, involve their people in the creative part of the process, because anybody who's in a creative workshop feels they own that solution. Even if they didn't come up with the idea, they still feel that they own it. And if you have the decision makers, people in the creative session, they feel ownership for the idea and they do some upward selling, if you like. Make sure that the business case absolutely nails the business issue you're trying to address.
Okay, Clive, we've got 2 more. Tofik is asking, between quantitative and qualitative KPIs, which one do you feel helps capture values for the organization? Could you give some examples of useful KPIs?
Ours are always, we always use quantitative, the value statement. So we have this level of rejects on the line. We're going to take it down to this level of rejects on the line by this date. This process takes this many days. We're going to get it down to this many hours by such and such. So you need quantitative metrics which are meaningful to the business partner you're working with. Value is in the eye of the beholder. So in our case, that's who we're working with.
Okay, and here's the last one. Ganmala is asking, what if disruptive innovation happens without groundwork or data analysis or vision? I'm asking because when traditional logistics business gets changed into end-to-end supply chain without groundwork or data analysis or vision, shall that be considered disruptive innovation? It could be in a positive way.
Yeah, Innovation can happen anywhere. I believe you can innovate on anything. And so if it arises by itself, that's fine. I have no problem with that. The one thing I would say is you can't innovate on everything at the same time. So I would say target where you look for innovation, target where you drive innovation. But if it comes up through a uncontrolled process, that's fine. That's fine. But take it, look at it, but be selective in terms of what you adopt and what you don't adopt, because you cannot implement every idea for every process in every part of your business. You have to be targeted. Where could innovation bring the most value to my organization? Which step in the process, if I can really innovate there, has the biggest potential? And that's the one you should target. But don't stop others coming up with ideas at any time.
Okay, well, I think that's all the time we have. We went a little bit over, but we had a lot of questions. And I thought they were great. I want to thank everybody for participating in this webinar. What we will do is we'll send you out the paper on disruptive innovation, and the next in the series will probably be leadership. So look forward to catching everybody on a leadership thing. Clive, thank you very much for your support on this, and thanks for all your help.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks to everyone for joining.